Hello, welcome to Flat Files. I'm Chrissy, and this is Kyle, and this is our video podcast where we chat with artists and makers and folks in the creative fields. Today, we talk with Francis and Jet of Tangled Arts, an organization in Toronto that brings visibility, access, and an open space to disabled artists in the Canadian art scene. We talk about a bunch of different projects, the inception of this organization, and they share with us a few different artists that they really love and wanted to bring light to. I do want to make a bit of a content warning right at the top. There is a poem that is shown within the latter part of the episode that does have language that is, let me just quote directly from the artists themselves, which is Tamyka Bullen. Language contained used as racist, ableist, and heterosexist insults. So I just do want to make that warning. We will make sure that there's timestamps there so that you know when that is, but it's a really beautiful poem and an interesting artist, so I think it is important to check their work out.
If you aren't yet a subscriber to our page, please hit that subscribe button and hit the little notification bell so that you never miss an episode of Flat Files or Art Discourse or any of the other programs that we do. If you really enjoy what Chrissy and I do as content creators, we could really use your support, and you could do that by becoming a member of our Spark Club through our Patreon page. I think that's it.
Enjoy the episode. Hi.
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 We're super happy to have you both here to chat with us today. And we're going to hand it over to you to start to introduce yourselves and Tangled Arts.
Cool. Jet, you're already hiding from the camera.
Just
Jet,
disappearing into the...
No. You first, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Frances Tomkins. My pronouns are they and them, and I'm the communications coordinator at Tangled Art and Disability. So Tangled is a nonprofit gallery. We are in 401 Richmond in Toronto with a bunch of other amazing art spaces, galleries, and artist studios and things like that. So we call ourselves sort of a site of political engagement for disability arts and culture. So we're entirely disability-led, and all of the artists that we show in our space are also disability identified. And for us, this is a really broad umbrella category that includes a lot of different folks from a lot of different communities. So disabled, deaf, mad, chronically ill, neurodiverse, Crip, sick, or spoonie artists are all folks that are involved in our space in a variety of different ways. And we kind of aim to create and increase those opportunities for disabled artists to participate in the arts in Canada. So we put on about 4 shows a year. We also do some different stuff. We do consultation work with other galleries and arts orgs to help them move towards being more accessible spaces as well. And we have a podcast as well called Crip Times, which it sounds like we kind of started really in a similar fashion to your podcast. Because, feeling those feelings in the middle of the pandemic or nearing the beginning of the pandemic where we were losing access to spaces where we could be in conversation with each other and be, sharing in community. That was a really great space for us to still be able to have access to each other and have those conversations. So check it out if you want, anywhere where you get your podcasts. We've been having a lot of fun putting that on. Jet, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah. So my name is Jet, and I am the digital coordinator at Tangled. I am a new member. I started at the beginning of the year and already feel like I'm in a comfortable space where I get considered my coworkers like my friends already, which I don't know, maybe that's too much.
I don't think so.
Yeah, and from my perspective, Tango really is a space where, Francis has said it, said everything so well said. But it is definitely a space where conversations are quite open. There's always this mutual respect, and also there's the opportunity to experiment because most ideas get run through the entire team, and people sort of kind of pick their aspects in which they feel more comfortable or strong about. So I feel like each exhibition and each project that goes on in Tangled. It's like a little machine that works with these pieces of these like incredible humans that pull resources from all spaces to just really support like our artists. As we said, like Tangled is a site of like political engagement. Absolutely, definitely. We are at a moment where in our times where things are sort of shifting and consciousness is expanding, and bringing disability arts and disability justice to the forefront. It's crucial because we should start thinking about it from the get-go, because otherwise every other attempt to add access later on, if it was not thought from the beginning, tends to, in my opinion, be kind of like get lost in translation.
Yeah.
In one way or another. Yeah.
That's lovely. I
That's
think, I mean, I have like tons of questions, but also with like flat files, sometimes we really like to, I feel like this word is overused, but whatever, I'm going to use it again, demystify some of the different like jobs or career paths within the arts. Sparkbox is one of the, I mean, maybe intentional, maybe unintentional things that have come out of running this is that people have started looking to us as like a way to understand the arts field in general. So maybe before we move into like some of the deeper conversations about Tangled Arts, could you talk a little bit about what exactly your role titles mean, and if you work in the arts as practicing artists, or if you work in the arts as like administrators or support roles, and sort of what that means to you, just because I think sometimes, yeah, just defining those spaces can be really helpful for people looking to get into the arts field in as many different ways as possible.
Yeah, for sure. I remember I went to OCAD, and I remember one of the biggest complaints I had about my education at OCAD was that it was really opaque. Like, what do I do after this? And a lot of the people whose careers as artists and as, people working in the arts who I really respected were, just because I was meeting them through OCAD, they were either practicing artists or they were professors or educators in some capacity. So I was like, what are the other options? Like, what can I do with this? Yeah. And I'm an amateur artist, but I never wanted to be a practicing like professional artist. So I was kind of like, what is there for me? But yeah, I think, I like these conversations. Like, what do people do in the arts? So I'm the communications coordinator. So what I do is I communicate about what Tangled does. So I run our social media platforms, and our communications team is me and one other person, Kayla Bessie, who's the public education coordinator. So we kind of work in tandem. But I'll do things like run the social media accounts. We make the newsletter. I run the website and make sure all the information there is accurate. And in the before times of like before we were kind of, a lot of the stuff we did was online, someone in my role would have done things like put together press kits, talk to artists to get a lot of the information. A lot of what I do is like kind of liaising between our artists and our curators and the public. So figuring out what I need to know from the artists about their work, their artist statement, their bio, whatever it is that they want to share. And getting that out to the public, whether it's through signage in the space, the physical space, whether it's through like outreach and invitation letters to different communities, letting them know that there might be something interesting to them going on in our space. So those kinds of things are all under my purview at the moment. But at Tangled, we work in kind of a unique structure because it is so, I don't really know the word for it. I want to say like decentralized, but that's not really the word. But like it's not hard and fast where like, this is my job, so I only do these roles. Right. We kind of share the labor in a way that it kind of works with our ethos of like accessibility as well, because like if someone is sick or is having a day where they have less capacity than they might on another day, like we're able to kind of work with each other and pick up where the other person left off, which is a really important part of our work structure here.
Yeah, so I am the digital coordinator, which my job entails it's kind of to be like a digital strategist. Like part of my research at Tangled and also outside of Tangled in my own personal practice is like implementing new technologies to make just art in places more accessible. So yeah, so most of my job is just sort of kind of like researching and bringing up to the table sort of new softwares or new technologies.
Yeah.
Definitely new technologies just to improve the way Tangled runs and also the way we can help our artists and also our audiences, not just the artists themselves, it's also our audiences. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so currently we're purchasing, well, obviously through grants and a lot of work, we're acquiring a remote telepresenter. So it's like a little robot that like really walks around, and you can zoom in, and it has really good quality. So you can zoom in into the piece, zoom out. You can like raise the height or lower it, and then really move around freely from your computer or your phone. And it's quite easy to navigate through your, through the path.
To like visit the gallery like from your home?
Yeah, from your home. From your home.
I'm very excited about the robot.
So awesome.
Yeah, because originally we were doing tours, and it was kind of like very do it yourself, which is something that we really like, we like that because humans are extremely creative and ingenious, and yeah, we really find very innovative and Crip ways to make things, work. So we had this like Zoom tour, and we had like a tripod and an iPad, right? And you invite a person through a Zoom link, and we will guide them through the gallery. With this new telepresenter, we could be at home. So let's say like things happen, but I have an appointment because I have a tour, so I can do it from my house as well. So now
so cool.
What it is important is to think about other ways of, is there closed caption and how we're going to implement them? Do we need to do an audio tour? And so. So every technology that you bring will also create new obstacles. Mm-hmm. So, I forgot to say, I am a painter.
Is this a painting of yours behind you?
Yeah.
Love it. I feel like you and I would get along real well painting-wise. We have a very similar aesthetic.
Yeah, and colors, yeah. So, I'm a painter, and I also, went to school for arts, and I always wanted to be a practicing artist. And within that, and in filling up grants and applying to galleries, I actually confronted a lot of ableism, and it was already for me finishing university was hard. Mm-hmm. Quitting many times, returning, doing it again, right? Because could be extremely stressful, and mental health and things happen. So as I confronted, the art industry, I found myself quite tired and always run down and not really having enough time for my practice. And I also started to sort of kind of open up my eyes to the lack of love, kind of care, access. So I started to engage more in the politics of art, and that's kind of how I ended up in Tangled.
That's so lovely. Thank you so much for outlining those positions. I just finished teaching the professional practices course at OCAD, and I 100% agree with you, Frances, that this is we felt it at Queen's as well, that there was, I don't want to say a narrow focus, but I would say the main goal, or the one that was referenced the most, was going a very traditional route into the arts. So make big things, probably paintings, and try to get into galleries, and and maybe apply for grants, but possibly we're not going to dive into how to do that, or what that actually looks like, or what the boundaries of those grants are, or any of those things.
Well, it was very obscure, how an artist actually functions and makes a living.
Yeah.
It was a great idea, but it was never here's how you make a life.
Well, and I feel like this was maybe a little bit of where Kyle and I started, with Sparkbox, really noticing some of the, lack of resources and information that is within the art space. And then the longer we were in it, the more you see how narrow the scope is for the arts world. Even within running the residency, thinking about accessibility, there were things that we came up against that we were okay, well, we don't really know how to create an environment that's good for this space. We had a deaf artist come who wanted to work in the screen printing studio, And we were like, okay, we can make this work. They asked if they could bring a translator, but they didn't have the money to afford to pay for their accommodations. So we were like, well, we'll just let them have accommodations for free. But then when they were here, it was like things like, oh, well, like you can't hear when the sound of the exposure unit is done to take your screen out, or, you know, there's no window on the door to the studio. So you don't know if someone's approaching the studio. And even when you aren't hard of hearing or deaf, it's alarming when someone just is in the studio with you all of a sudden. Yeah. And when you're working on a project and you're immersed in it, it can really mess up a few things when you're, you know, all of a sudden interrupted by another person. So, you know, there was just like a lot of little things that we were like, okay, well, how do we address this challenge and what do we need to do? And that's when I first found out about Tangled, actually, was through these, because there's an amazing amount of resources on the website, which I looked again today, and there's even more of them. And I think that it's just such a vital thing to have out there, especially for arts organizations. And that was one of the reasons why I reached out, because I just think it's something that should be highlighted. And if people don't know it exists, I really think that they should. So I think, I mean, obviously the two of you haven't been part of Tangled since its inception in, like, I don't know, early 2000s or whenever it was. But I'm sure that you can probably speak a little to like how it came to be and what the impetus of the project was.
Sure. Yeah, we're both pretty new people at Tangled, so I'm not an expert on the history, but it actually started out as an arts festival, Abilities Arts Festival. And yeah, it was in large part a response to you know, some of those barriers that you're talking about in arts education settings are so compounded for so many marginalized folks, and for, you know, people who are disabled, deaf, mad, like these, the spaces that we inhabit as artists, as arts administrators, as, you know, musicians, anything under that umbrella can be so difficult to access. You know, a lot of the time, this is kind of a roundabout answer, but a lot of the time when we do consultation work, people come to us and they're like, okay, we want to be accessible. Great, amazing. Can you give us a list of all the things that we need to do in order to be accessible? And we can't really, because exactly the stuff that you're talking about, it's these types of things that, you know, yes, we can give you like top 10 things that like these things will make you more accessible as an organization, but we don't know what we don't know. So it takes this kind of trial and error, and it takes being in community with one another to figure out like, oh, I can't hear the ding when the exposure unit goes off. That's a problem that we need to figure out how to solve together and be, you know, doing that work in community. So I think that Tangled was sort of started, and like the idea was that it could be a place and a setting that people could like be safe to have those conversations, and that we could invite folks to go through that learning process together. And a lot of times people come to Tangled as sort of like the experts in accessibility. And we also kind of give the caveat of like, we're not experts either. We're just like a dedicated space where we're trying these things out and we're learning about these things together. And because we have a lot of these conversations and we're in community with a lot of disabled folks, like we know a lot of these things now that like when we started, we didn't know. And I mean, I've been here now for 2 years, and I've learned like the amount of knowledge that I came in knowing, thinking, oh, I know so much about accessibility. And I've learned so much in these 2 years. And every interaction that I have with a different community of people, or with a different project, or, you know, trying something new out in the space, is a learning experience that I learned things that I didn't know and that I couldn't really put on a checklist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jet, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, just doing some like research here. So 2010, the Abilities Art Festival. That's what Tangled was prior. It's when it actually became a registered like charitable organization, and you know, since 2011 they started like, you know, introducing like programming year around. And yeah, just in the website, there's like a really nice chronological kind of like thing, which it's really interesting to see, because it gets like it grows as years go by. So I want, you know, like this year, for example, we have a different annual report in which we were thinking of like pandemic reflections on how artists were actually like earning their living, or what were they doing during the pandemic. And also we wanted to allocate money to disabled artists, right? Because the pandemic was really hard. So we also think about these things, like how can we help out our community. And so, yeah, like there's this pandemic reflection that we are working on, and it's actually a virtual online space in which these pieces from 11 artists will be displayed for 1 year, like in Gather Town. And again, this is one of these things where we are experimenting, because we have encountered a lot of like obstacles within within the creation of the space, right? So I think that's it's like a good research kind of like opportunity for us to sort of kind of like understand, for example, things that we can suggest in the future, right? Like for Gather Town, for example, which they're pretty like better place. But there's not only this Gather Town, right? There's multiple other places, right? That eventually, disabled people are everywhere, so they start, occupying space online, and then you're like, oh yeah, my screen reader cannot read a JPEG, right? And it's just like, so it's important that we vocalize these things, and I think in Tangle we make an effort to really do that.
Well, I think like what we noticed with Sparkbox was it takes a lot of just like sort of what you said, like acknowledging that you don't know, listening to what you don't know, and then doing your best to resolve or find a solution to manage whatever that particular situation is. And then the next person that comes in, even if like on a surface level, it's like, okay, these might be similar challenges or similar things to the last time, being like willing to acknowledge that that's probably not the case. And, every situation, no matter who it is going to require like a different amount of listening and a different amount of engagement and a different amount of like troubleshooting and just being like willing and open to navigate through that and like listen. I don't know. I just feel like listening is very important. Yeah.
It's true. I'm trying to think of, I don't remember who the quote is now, but we always say at Tangled, access is love. Because like of all those things, right? Like you can have your list of best practices and do your best, but in the end, like it comes down to like all the things that love comes down to, like listening to each other, being a safe person for each other, so that when I have a problem, I know that I'm safe coming to you and saying, I need this, can you help me? And being like committed to doing the work of accessibility, even when, a lot of the time it's not glamorous work, and a lot of the time it's totally invisible work. Like the communications team at Tangled talks about this all the time, because like so often a lot of the work that we do towards accessible communications, unless you need that particular type of access, you don't even see it. If we're writing like image descriptions or alt text, like we'll put that in the caption of a post, for example, but a lot of the times like that's sort of in the back end. Like unless you're using a screen reader, you won't even know if something has human written alt text or not. So a lot of those pieces of labor that, when they all add up, it takes quite a bit of time and energy and capacity. There are things that people don't see. And I think that, like, I always think of that as an act of love, because that's how I think about love. It's like the work that you do, not to be recognized for it or not to make a big deal out of it, but just because it's the natural thing that you do for human beings that you care about and who you want to be in community with.
Yeah. I also like how you keep saying in community. I've never heard that before, but it's really nice. Yeah.
Because I mean, like a lot of disabled folks and deaf and mad folks are like very excluded from arts, like communities, arts, the places that we, not only that we gather, but like that people are able to make their livings, right? So I think a big part of what we do at Tangled is like acknowledging that this is a community, and that there are multiple communities with different desires and different cultures and different histories interacting together, and that we're like consciously trying to be a place that invites that in, instead of kind of just flattening it and saying like, this is how we are in this space, and if you want to be with us, then you have to be this way too.
Yeah.
I have questions. I have questions about podcasts, and I have questions about the robot. I'd like to talk about the robot first, because I'm very interested by this. Okay, so To clarify, it is like a robot that's physical in the gallery that has like motors and wheels and moves around. And you could you just talk? I would love to talk the nerdy stuff about the robot. Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so, and I want to add before like the robot thing, something about the in community is that we really share information. Like information is always constantly being transmitted because it's like, oh, I figured out that like Google Slides are not good with like most screen readers, or you should check this resource that has like really cool, disabled like artists, or like we're always sharing information in that way, which is really, really great.
Yeah.
And I love it. I really like that part of our community. It's very loving. But going back to the robot, so, well, interesting. We had to survey a couple. We did have some appointments, and you can always like drive them around from your computer. And we saw a couple, and we all like pretty much the decision of the robot. I felt like it was very, very communal, like the majority of our decisions. And we had the opportunity to see the pros and the cons of like different ones, and also so eventually we ended up going for one called the Double 3, which is a American company located in California. Unfortunately, there's no Canadian companies right now doing robots, and there's other companies. For example, there was a very cool French one that had like an open source back end to the robot where you can like add your own applications like later on if you develop them. But it was very limited in its accessibility features. So it's like that was a no-no. Right? So there was like different obstacles that we had to go through. So Double 3 was the best option for the gallery, even though we still have some few things that we should go through to figure out if there's a way or how can we solve that problem. Anything else about the robot? I've kind of forgot what was the question originally.
This is like really weird, like to be able to like. I love that technology is at this point that we can buy robots that we could remote pilot from our homes to go through like a Zoom tour. So like you could just like book it out all day long and people can like log in and take themselves, or does it have to be guided by somebody?
Well, that's something that you could guide it yourself, or someone can guide it for you. We have not discussed it, sort of like the logistics of how the robot is gonna like work, but you do book an appointment. It's kind of like now we are by appointment only. So, and we do that because we want to really like protect our like everyone in the team, and also in the 401 Richmond building, right? As we have noticed that a lot of things got like lifted and things, and we are committed to just really protect like each other. So by appointment for now. And what was the point? Oh yes, it will be the same. You will just like book it up, and then you will like walk around, and the robot does have sensors so you don't bump into things.
I love how like this robot actually makes you incredibly more accessible globally, because you're no longer limited by geographical space, but there's also a whole group of individuals who are immobile and can't leave their homes. And this gives them an opportunity to go somewhere. I absolutely love it.
I mean, I wish it was more accessible, like price-wise, right? Because that's also part of access. Is like these days to be healthy or to have accessibility, it's extremely expensive for like institutions, and so that's why like apartment buildings do not like make accessible apartments. So and because all these things are commodified, it's always like they see these things like as a drag, when it's just like, no, it's a human right. It's like, I live in I exist in this space, and I'm a person, and I breathe. And so, yeah, anyways, stop my rant.
Like you were saying earlier, Jen, like with technology, there's always new barriers that come with it. And there's always new limitations. So like as much as this opens you up in some ways, it also, I guess, like presents like you have to have good internet, you have to have access to a good computer, or at least something that can access that. Like you have to have different things, which causes a whole slew of other problems.
I did an AR project last year and really got thinking about like tech access. Like how can I do this project in a public gallery that's being funded by taxpayer dollars, and then ask people to download an app and have a phone that can have an app on it and pay for data and have Wi-Fi and understand how to use a technology that they don't know anything about, like in a public space. Doesn't make any sense. And so luckily the institution was really like open and eager to have something like that. So they paid for iPads that we set up, and we ran the program so people could just go up to it and experience it. They didn't have to do any work or have anything. But then there was like an enormous amount of hurdles and like issues with working with the program that I had used, because I was using the program in a way that it was never designed. And so it, created a bunch of hiccups, which burdened the staff and then burdened me. It was just like, it was striking how challenging it was. But I want to say something that you mentioned earlier in relation to like part of the robot situation, and that kind of makes me think of something that I read in an article about Tangled Arts in The Walrus, which was this like idea of having like a care clause, I think is what it was called, it seems like contracts with artists, but maybe it is also in contracts with staff members, that like things are going to happen. Stuff is going to change. People have real lives, and lives, when you're living, things come up. You get sick, you change your idea or whatever. This was never something that we wrote into a clause, but it was something that we always just like allowed to be a reality. But I loved that, you have this clause in contracts that says, we get that you're, a human being living, and that sometimes stuff is going to come up, and we're not going to reprimand you based on these like, arbitrary rules of deliverables when it comes to like how people think about exhibitions. I don't know if either of you, like, you don't really maybe work in the contract writing part of the business, but I just think that that's such like, there's so many lovely things happening, and it just seems to be happening across all boards, not just for people coming to the space or people working in the space, but also for people working with the space.
Yeah, for sure. So the care clause is for both employees of Tangled and for artists who are signing contracts to work with us. And I think a really beautiful example of a moment when the care clause was employed was during a show we did in 2021. So a few shows back. It was called Undeliverable. And there were 6 different artists in the show. And it ended up that just because of different things like illness, disability, just timing, COVID, all manner of different things, the artist statements that were supposed to be published like on vinyl on the wall, they weren't ready for the opening date. So instead of, that being a big problem and, having to push the show back or having to penalize artists in some way, or, whatever choices maybe could have been made, the choice that we made instead was we painted just the word undeliverable in gouache on the wall where those artist statements should have been. So it was 6 times the word undeliverable. I have a photo I can send you. And that ended up being like a really cool sort of conversation starter area of the gallery, because we were giving tours at this time, both in person and digital. So when, we come across the part where we would have said, here's the artist statements, here's what they are. Instead, we got to have this conversation about, what it means to hold space for the fact that sometimes things don't go the way that you want them to go. They don't go as planned. And the human beings that are working with you on the art that's in your space are actually more important than an arbitrary deadline. Always. And so often in our industry are treated the opposite way. Mm-hmm. So it was like a really nice opportunity to get to kind of like show what that means to us and start having those conversations about it. And people loved it. Like we had so many people who were like, wow, that's fantastic. That's so great. I was so happy to be able to have this conversation. So instead of being a negative thing, it actually turned out to be a really positive thing. And we still got the artist statements. They came in 2 weeks or whatever time later, right? Like the world didn't end. It was fine. Yeah.
No, I think it's such a good conversation. I was having a chat with another like arts administrator organizer, and they're working with teens, and what they had sort of pitched to the grantor once they got in the room with the teens and started working on the projects was just like not accomplishable. But the whole experience was great, and the teens are enjoying the exchange, and there is like something to be shown for that, just not the way that it was meant to. And so they started having a similar conversation, like, what does it mean to be so bound by these like thoughts of a project in the future that you actually detriment the project in the present? why does that just shouldn't exist. That shouldn't be how we deal with, especially the arts, where it should be more, about having a real honest conversation and actually engaging with people in the place that they are.
For sure.
I had a question about podcasts. So you all started a podcast. Tell me about your podcast. How did you get going with it?
So the podcast also started before either one of us started, right before. Jet, do you want to talk about the podcast at all, or do you want me to? No, you want me to? Okay. So the podcast is called Crip Times. And that's a play on words of the term Crip time, which is this concept that we often talk about in disability spheres. That's basically like the concept that disabled folks and chronically ill folks experience time differently than our non-disabled counterparts for a variety of reasons. So like, maybe things take longer, maybe things are, like you experience time differently if you're experiencing pain. Maybe, if you have to get somewhere and you have a support person and that's going to take longer to navigate than if you don't. Maybe you need to get wheel trans and that's going to add, so for a lot of different reasons. And that's kind of like connected to our care clause too. Is like we're open to these different experiences of time that kind of step outside of a normative like understanding of when things should happen, how things should happen in regards to time. So that was where the name comes from. But yeah, it was just a response to feeling like, this gallery that we have at the time, most, if not all of the stuff that we were doing was in person. So it sounds really similar to your situation. Mm-hmm. And, not only were we disappointed that we don't have this in-person physical space where we can share art together anymore, but for a lot of disabled folks, it was, who are already isolated for a variety of reasons, having this isolation be compounded by, this terrifying event where we're now, stuck in our houses, unable to get access to the supports that we're used to being able to have in our lives. Hopefully, we were trying to kind of figure out a way that we could put our energy and our resources into a project that we could kind of meet people where they were at. And so we thought and kind of came upon the idea of a podcast as a way to still be with folks, like be in their spaces with them, and they can access it to whatever degree they want. Like sometimes we'll have people who will listen to the podcast the day it comes out. Sometimes we have people who will, revisit it like a year down the line. We always write transcripts for our podcasts as well so that people can read them as well. And yeah, it ended up being a really, really wonderful opportunity to sort of invite folks into the lives of not only artists, but we also talk to disability activists in the community and different folks working in that sort of big realm of disability arts, disability studies, disability activism. And just to be able to talk to each other, it sounds really similar to what you're doing with Flat Files, is just to have that opportunity to not feel so isolated from one another and not feel so you're wondering what's going on and you don't have the information, just to try something out. And we've received a lot of really positive feedback from it. So we're in the process of recording the episodes for season 2. So we are very excited.
We'll make sure that we'll link to that in the show notes.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, I can send you all the info on that. Okay. Yeah, so neither one of us are directly involved in the making of the podcast. So it's actually, Kayla Bessie, who is the other half of the comms team, and then Christina McMullen, who is my, the job I do now, that she was that before.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. I was how do I say this sentence? Yeah, so I was kind of her replacement. But she's still working on the podcast. And then also Yusuf Kadora, who...
Yusuf.
I'm not sure his capacity exactly, but so those are the 3 hosts of the podcast, and they're all wonderful.
We were going to do some art shares, and I think maybe Jet, you had something that you wanted to share.
Yes, Jet, do you want to start us off?
You should have screen share ability now.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, so let me just go through the. So the first artist that I'm going to share, her name is Jena, Alma, and she's a multiracial Guyanese Canadian, disabled, queer, neurodivergent interdisciplinary activist. She is the founder of Artistic Embodiment and Pretty Wings Toronto, which it's a dance company led by disabled BIPOC women.
Awesome.
And yeah, so I'm gonna share her Instagram. But I have her here. So just give me 1 second. This is like Pretty Wings Toronto, and this is like the dance project that Jena is part of. And her work is here. And actually, she is going to be in our pandemic reflection for this year. So keep you posted when it comes out. So yeah, so she really, I really love her photographs because they show like the body in like a space that it's supposed to be like natural, but it's also like man-made, and there's this like just a sort of position of like nature versus, or not versus, but like nature and like construction. And then, you know, the paintings that this is Jena herself, you know, the colors and the paint. And as you can see, I'm just going to move myself. I guess you don't, yeah, from the screen. I'm just going to read a quote of this photograph.
Mm-hmm.
Today, the old one inside you is collecting bones. And what is she remaking? She is the soul self, the builder of the soul home. Ella lo hace a mano. She makes and remakes the soul by hand. What is she making for you? You wish psychoanalytic advice? Go gather bones. And this quote is from a book called Women Who Run with Wolves by Clarissa Picola. And I personally have read that book and I will recommend it. It's a fantastic book that is full of mythology, that it's gathered from very different places in the world, but mostly Latin America, Mexico too. And all of these mythological stories are about women and how women have psychologically and emotionally being sort of gated and repressed. And these mythological stories have a didactic purpose of sort of like, as you read them, give you that eureka moment where you sort of like open up one door at a time of these sort of self-judgments and repressions, you know?
Yeah.
So anyways, I really enjoy Jena's work because she works with storytelling, right? Like these photographs like have or tell a story, a visual story. And yeah.
And works in performance, right? It seems performance and dance and storytelling.
Yes, I forgot to say the important part. Yes.
And do you know the paint that's on the body, is that like an action that's part of the performance, or is that done prior to and is just highlighting elements of the body?
I do not have the answer for that, which, you know what, that's great. I would love to. I really would like, I just want to email him and be like, hey, I love this.
Yeah,
like, well, can you just tell me more? Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not sure if it's like during the performance or prior. So.
That's like what's fun about looking at work too, right? I think that it informs a lot about like how artists inspect and become like inquisitive when they're seeing, well, in this case, seeing like the photographs of something that like an action that was happening or has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard about that book and people do recommend it very highly.
Oh my God. It did change. I want to reread it. I do. And I made a lot of friends through that book, just like for some reason, just meeting new people and like sharing what books are you reading. And I was reading it also at the same time as a couple people who are still my friends now and really have sort of transformed their lives. I've seen them grow
Awesome.
quite a lot after that book. So check it out. Awesome. Yeah, so that is my artist to share. Do you want to share yours, friends? Or do you folks have a question more about Jena?
I think that I have one more question because I feel like this word came up before and I don't know what it's referencing. But the glitter and spoons, the spoon word, I feel like maybe at the beginning, Frances, you used a word like spooning or spoons, or maybe I misheard that entirely and I don't know what I'm talking about, which is highly likely.
Oh, you got it. You know exactly.
I don't know. I don't know this word in the context of what we're talking about.
Yeah. So spoonie comes from spoon theory, which I'm actually not sure who coined spoon theory. Let me look it up really quick to see. I can't see who coined it, but it's sort of a way of communicating to like a chronically ill or disabled audience about how those who do experience chronic pain or chronic illness like have to budget our energy really carefully. So like, for example, like if I say a person who doesn't have a chronic illness or disability has an unlimited amount of spoons or a very high amount of spoons, and a spoon is like a unit of energy. So if I only have, it won't show you my spoon. If I only am given 5 spoons at the beginning of a day, then I have to choose really carefully like how I use them. So say getting out of bed expends 1 spoon, taking a shower expends 3 spoons, making a meal expends 3 spoons. So if I only have 5 spoons as like units of energy, I have to decide, am I able to take a shower or am I able to make a meal? Mm-hmm. And you have to like sort of budget your energy and your capacity around that. So the phrase has kind of evolved from that of like we could ask each other like, oh, do you have the spoons for this today? Meaning like, do you have the capacity to do this today without putting yourself at risk of pain, injury, burnout, those types of things. And then sometimes people who are chronically ill will identify as spoonie, like, oh, I'm a spoonie, meaning, you know, I'm chronically ill. It might take me more energy to do these things, or I might have a limited capacity to do things that for a non-disabled person might seem like just normal, or they might expect. We might expect these things of each other.
Thank you so much.
I
definitely like, I can see my sister has MS and I can definitely like see that in like, you know, like her way of thinking about, you know, especially on really bad days, like this like capacity limit. I'm gonna have to share this with her because I've never heard this, but I think that it also just is like a gentler way than saying capacity, because capacity has such a like business or administrative quality to it.
For sure.
So, thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Jet, for going through these slides that are up on, I don't want to get the name wrong.
Jena. Alma. Yeah, I went through the last 2 quite fast, but
I can share that though in our Instagram stories, because we usually do highlights of the artists that are shared. So
okay, perfect. Great. I will stop sharing.
I will screen share as well. Desktop or no? I just want to share Google Chrome. Okay, can you see me?
Vanessa, yeah, Vanessa is a resident here.
Oh my god, that's so cool. Okay, have you shared Vanessa's work on the podcast before?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay. I don't think so.
I didn't want to double up. But Vanessa Dion Fletcher is amazing. She's one of my favorite artists that we've shown work from Tangled. So this is her website, but I want to focus on the quill work that she does. So Vanessa Dion Fletcher is a Lenape and Potawatomi artist and uses, among other techniques and mediums, traditional quill work as part of her practice. So this was the piece that we had in the Tangled space. It's so gorgeous. I'd never seen this before. So this is a scan of the original, which would have been on like a small piece of paper, like I want to say like 8.5 by 11. So very close work. And these quills would have been woven into the paper, and you can see this is like a pretty high resolution scan. So you can see that, like, you can see even the holes that are sort of poked into the paper to hold the quill in place. And so this is porcupine quills that are hand dyed using natural dyes. So things like berries or coffee, turmeric, so natural dyes. There's another one of her quill works. And it was really cool because so she showed these works in the show Undeliverable that we spoke about earlier. And something that was really cool about that show was that we kind of wanted to open the space to artists to experiment with something that they hadn't really had a professional opportunity to do before. So whether that was a new medium or a project that they hadn't been able to get funding for before or something like that. So for Vanessa, that meant experimenting with scale for these pieces. So the original quill works are, these are porcupine quills, so that gives you a sense of scale, how big these are.
Yeah.
So when she's creating these works, it's very close to the body, right? She's holding the piece of paper really close and going in and out through the paper. So that's very up close and personal to the body. So for the Tangled show, this was printed on a wall, and this circle was 72 inches in height, so like 6 feet in height. So the idea behind that was to kind of give the viewer more of an embodied experience of what that work would look like for the artist when she was creating it, right? So really getting to be up close and personal with the material. And so traditionally, like quill work was practiced before beadwork for things like moccasins or baskets. And so these would be originally, they'd be like softened in the mouth, the quill. You'd put it in your mouth, soften it with your saliva, and then pull it through your teeth, and that would flatten it. And now you would use like a bone tool instead, and just like warm water. And this is also like all this information about this is like available on the artist's website as well if you want to look through. She's got some really, really beautiful work.
Yeah, these are great. I also I really want to see the large version of it as well.
Yeah. So after she had that work in the Tangled space, she did this installation. So you can tell the scale of this is like even more ginormous. So this is in a public park. This is Gallery TPW show, and this is Vanessa's work, Relative Saturation, in that show. So this is in a parquet, and all of these works were in response to like the parquet as a public space in Toronto. So here's another image of that.
Wow, this is gorgeous.
So it was really cool to see how those experiments with scale translated to like a public artwork, and to see her work in that public space was really amazing.
Such a great opportunity too to I'm going to say gift because I feel like it doesn't happen that often, to artists to say, is there an idea that you've been wanting to play around with but haven't been able to give yourself the space or the time to do so? Here it is.
Yeah, for sure. It was really fun. Like another artist, where else did I share? But another artist wanted to do, their name is Aslyn Thomas, and they did a piece where they painted on a wall in gouache just the title of a work, and the work itself was Invisible Sculpture. And it was a co-created sculpture where like everyone who entered the space and the custodians of the space would commit to being scent-free. So like not wearing perfumes, not wearing scented body products or soaps. And that was the sculpture, that we co-created a scent-free space together so that people with chemical sensitivities could safely come into our space and not get sick. So that was like their experiment in that space, was they wanted to experiment with like painting that title on the wall using gouache, because it's like a chemically safe, like scent-free artistic medium. Mm-hmm. So it was really cool to like just kind of hand over the space and be like, whatever you need it for to like learn and further your practice in a way, that's what it's for right now. And it was really, really cool.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. This one, it would be Tamyka Bullen, and I just found out that Tamyka used to come to the space and teach the team ASL before. So it's like fantastic. So actually, we've been thinking about like later on maybe having classes when the weather is better. And this is just like a conversation that happened really quickly, and like probably I'll bring it up again just to remember, having them in an open space, because there's an open space where Tangle is. So perhaps, so Tamyka, great. But yeah, so Tamyka is like a deaf artist, and she's a performer, and is a social justice advocate, and she has volunteered and worked with youth, deaf women, immigrant, and LGBT communities. 2015, she performed her poetry for the first time at a Toronto subway station, and this was an experience which gave her the confidence to perform in Rare Theatre's latest production, After the Blackout, who was created by Judith Thompson, the winner of the Governor General Award, and well, blah blah blah. There's more. It's great, but what I want to show is this, which is a poem that Tamyka wrote. I'm gonna expand this. That Tamyka wrote after visiting Guyana, and how that trip sort of kind of like revealed to her a lot of the differences, right, between Canada and other parts of the world, and also like class struggle. And yeah, so I'm just gonna leave this for like maybe a couple more seconds, maybe 60 seconds.
I can't read this fast, but
I know, me too. Actually, that makes me think that I can slower it down, absolutely, but I don't know. See? Well, anyways, yes, we should share this poem in its extent, to make it a good, to be fair to the piece. Yeah, so that's it. That was my artist. So
I also really like the idea of having like ASL language learning in an open space. I'm assuming you mean like the top like garden space of 401 Richmond? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah,
That space is
absolutely.
the best.
I've been thinking so much about, like ASL, like lately, like kind of like I get obsessed into things, like, I get research a lot about it. Recently, went for Commotion. Oh, thanks to Francis, the show was fantastic. Oh my God. So I went to a show because Francis couldn't go, and the show was from a deaf rap artist, and I forgot the name. Francis, do you remember?
Yeah, it was one night with Signmark. Signmark is the rap group from Finland, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, from Finland. And it was such a great experience because, we did have in our past exhibition, we have Miriam Hafisi, who is like a deaf Iranian woman who grew up in like oral education. So she was not allowed to sign. And it was until she moved to Canada when she was way older, when she had to, like, she learned ASL. And then, like, for her was like her life was like change, her like sense of humor came out, like her personality, started to appear. Yeah. So at this show, it was great because, the rapper is just, it's doing his show, like signing, and I could almost like read it, but I can't, right? It's like, and I just want to be there, and I really hope in my future, this is like a goal that I'm going to give to myself, like I really want to eventually be able to speak the ASL as I speak,
Yeah.
So
it is a beautiful language. It really is. Amazing.
Okay, I'll do one more share super quick. I have this little item here with me. So
oh no, it's space. It's space. There we go.
So this is it's made of pewter. I was like, what metal is it made of? So it's a little plaque. It's made of pewter. And I believe it's like inkjet print on top of it. And it just says
okay.
So this is by an artist called Jes Sachse. And they are an artist who's been in a few of our shows at Tangled. They're actually in our current show with the intergenerational LGBT artist residency, their show that's happening upcoming in May. And they were in Undeliverable as well. So these plaques they've installed in various gallery spaces, and often they'll install them in sort of a, like, imagine if these were, the whole wall was just covered with these little plaques, so that it creates this really almost overwhelming field of, like, fills up your whole vision. So it's kind of trying to recall like a donor wall aesthetic. They'll have different words. So this version of it says permission. It's probably, the image is probably flipped. But...
No, you're good.
Oh, it's not? Okay, good. But they also had ones that said, I need a minute. And we had those in our space, and we had them actually stuck to we have like a couch, like a pink couch that is always in our shows, so that people can sit down. So we stuck it to that to kind of be an invitation to folks, that if they wanted to take a break and sit down and have that opportunity, that was there for them. So these little plaques are kind of an invitation to, like, think about accessibility as something that is co-created and as something that is, like, the onus is on the person asking. So it's kind of like a piece of vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And so, like, these words of, like, I need a minute or permission, were these, like, landing points or reflection points to be able to kind of consider the work of access that we do in community. And I'll send you some photos of them, how they've been installed in different places. Like right now, these permission plaques are installed on our gallery floor in sort of a pathway, so that when people come into the space, they have to step over it in order to get through the threshold. So as the run of the show goes on, it will kind of become more battered, and like these corners will kind of flip up, and the text will maybe get rubbed off and stuff like that. So it's kind of this ever-changing installation as well, which I like about it. But yeah, I have this in my house, and it's like a landing place for my attention to remind myself to give myself permission before I'm asking that of other people, to just to extend that permission to myself first and hold that space for myself. So it's like a little precious object.
It's such a good reminder too.
Yeah.
I love that. There's an artist that I'll send you a link. I can't think of their name off the top of my head, but they do a lot of work about like having seats available in spaces, and just talking about the different ways that we like view and engage with art within a gallery context. So you might really like their work. I'll find that link and send it off.
Amazing. I would love that.
This has been so great. Thank you both so much.
To be on your podcast.
Yeah, that was so fun.
Yeah.
I was very nervous at the beginning, like really feeling it like here in like my esophagus. But then as you went on, I was like, oh yeah, it's chill.
It's very chill. No, we just this has been so wonderful, and it's been nice to like get to talk about the organization, but also talk a little bit about the two of you, and then see works that you find really meaningful and special. And yeah, we just really appreciate you being here and being open, and also being very tolerant of our technical limitations.
No problem. It was really fun. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Goodbye.
Yeah, same. Bye, friends. Bye.